All right, welcome back to the deep dive. This week, you sent in some sources about a story that's been going on for a while, US-Venezuela relations, and in particular the migration situation.
Hmm.
And looks like there's a pretty significant development. Bloomberg's reporting that the U.S. is going to start sending deportation flights back to Venezuela, and the first one's actually scheduled for today, Sunday, March 23rd.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Yep.
It's really a new chapter in how these two countries are handling the whole Venezuelan migrant situation. The U.S. and Venezuela they worked out an agreement to make this happen, and it's interesting because like right away Jorge Rodriguez, who's pretty important guy in the Venezuelan government, he came out and said, like, migrating is not a crime. But at the same time, he said Venezuela is totally ready to take back anyone who wants to come home.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
This isn't happening out of the blue, is it? One of the things that you sent over mentioned that back when Trump was president, his administration was actually thinking about letting Chevron keep operating in Venezuela
Right.
past some deadline that was coming up. Why is Chevron like such a big deal for Venezuela?
Well, Chevron's not just any oil company down there. It's a lifeline for their economy. I mean, Venezuela's oil production relies heavily on them, and that oil money, it's how they pay for all the important stuff. Food, medicine, you name it. So the US could really use Chevron to put the squeeze on them.
So it sounds like Venezuela knew that, right?
Yeah.
There were some reports that Maduro's government actually stopped taking those migrant flights from the U.S. for a bit before this whole agreement. Was that like a power play, you think, connected to this Chevron thing?
Oh yeah. It definitely seems that way. By hitting pause on those flights, Maduro was basically saying, "Hey, if you want us to take back our people, you gotta let Chevron keep doing business here." It's like migration became a bargaining chip tied directly to money and oil.
Right, and it gets even more complicated because the sources we looked at, they
Yeah.
also pointed out that the U.S., while they were thinking about Chevron, they were also pushing Maduro to make some democratic reforms and obviously to take back those migrants. So it's like a whole multi-pronged strategy.
Exactly. It's like the U.S. is trying to use a carrot and stick approach, right? The carrot being Chevron staying put, which would help Venezuela economically, and the stick being the pressure to take back migrants and make political changes. This new agreement on deportation flights, it kind of suggests things might be shifting.
And there's another wrinkle here. We saw reports that flights might restart earlier in March, but it looks like Sunday's the actual start date.
Yeah.
That delay makes you wonder about, what all went down behind the scenes to actually hammer this out.
For sure. These kinds of agreements between countries, they always involve a lot of back and forth. You've got legal stuff, human rights issues, the logistics of actually getting people back. That delay probably means there are some tough conversations going on to get everyone on the same page.
And all this is happening while there's other stuff going on related to Venezuelan migration. Just last week, there were reports about over 200 Venezuelans getting deported, but this time to a prison in El Salvador.
Wow.
They were accused of being part of that Tren de Aragua gang.
Hmm.
How does that fit into this whole bigger picture?
It just goes to show that this isn't just a U.S.-Venezuela problem, right? It's a whole regional thing. Other countries are dealing with this too, and they're, coming up with their own solutions, especially when it comes to people they think might be criminals. It really highlights the different challenges and reactions across the region.
So to kind of sum all this up, the U.S. is starting to send deportation flights back to Venezuela today, March 23rd. This came about after they reached an agreement that seems to be linked to Chevron maybe getting to keep working in Venezuela. And all this happened while the U.S. was also pressuring Maduro for reforms, after Venezuela briefly stopped accepting those flights. And then on top of that, we've got those deportations to El Salvador. It's complicated.
Totally. What we're seeing is this big collision of issues. Venezuelans leaving the country, oil being a huge factor in the whole thing, and the ongoing political tension between the U.S. and Venezuela. These flights starting up again, it's like a direct result of all those tough conversations.
And it really makes you think about the big picture. I mean, when you see how these things are all connected, the migration, the oil, the politics, it makes you wonder about the long-term consequences, right? What do you think about that? What's going to happen to the people caught in the middle of this? And what about the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela? How's that going to play out? There's a lot to think about. Thanks for taking the time to dive into this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.